Well, good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome. We are going to start very, very shortly on this webinar. Good to see so many people joining us. And I think we are on 2 o'clock to make it, Luella?
Yep.
Good to go. Right.
Let's go.
So, thank you very much for joining us. Very warm welcome to this Lindum webinar. We've titled this Plastics Tax for Dummies. Now, please don't get the wrong impression. We're not calling anyone dumb. But what we're going to seek to do is we're going to seek to have a brief and a light-hearted look at the upcoming UK plastics packaging tax. We're going to try and cut through some of the jargon, try and simplify things a little bit. And we're going to get it done in 25 minutes with an extra 5 minutes for questions at the end. So I'm Bob, this is Emily.
Hello.
And behind the scenes we've got Luella doing some of the techie bits. So we'll make a start with some housekeeping. Now, we have to do this because it's a webinar. We have to do things like housekeeping. So please familiarise yourself with the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. I'm sure many of you will have used Zoom a few times over the last 18 months or so. Audio, if you're struggling to hear us, check your settings, etc. There's a chat function. Please make use of this. Be good to hear from you, see who we've got on the call, where you're calling in from, perhaps, what companies we've got on the call. And we've got a Q&A function. I'm sure you're familiar with that. Please use that to drop through any questions, anything you'd like explaining a bit further, or anything that's not quite clear, let us know in there. Luella will drop through my email address on there now as well. So if you'd like a follow-up call, or you'd like to discuss something in more detail afterwards, myself or one of the team would be glad to get in touch. And then finally, in case of an emergency, you can leave. Now we've got to start with a brief disclaimer. So this is something we do have to make you aware of, that the HMRC have not yet released the final legislation on the UK plastics packaging tax. So what this means is that everything we're giving you today in this webinar is our interpretation of the latest guidance, but it's not the final guidance. So it could change, and anything we say in this webinar is not legal advice as such. So we'll make a start with Emily telling us, what is it, plastics packaging tax? Take it away.
Okay, so where has the plastic packaging tax come from? So it's a positive way for the government to try and help increase plastic recycling, decrease the amount of plastic that goes into landfill and incineration, and also as a positive way to stimulate new recycling technologies in the UK. So first things first, just a brief information what the plastic packaging tax is. So the plastic packaging tax will be a tax on plastic packaging made in or imported into the UK where the plastic used contains less than 30% recycled plastic content. So just some facts and figures. If you are liable for the tax, which we will go into later on, the tax is £200, charged at £200 per metric tonne. And you could potentially be liable if you produce more than 10 tonnes of plastic packaging in a 12-month period. The guidance does go into a bit of detail as to what they class as plastic packaging. So for the purposes of the tax, plastic packaging is packaging designed to be used in the supply chain. So things like ready meal trays, things like that, and single-use consumer packaging. So things like carrier bags, disposable cups, things along those lines. Now, although there's some detail of examples in the guidance, we do not have a definitive list of what classes as plastic packaging. It's open to interpretation. Within the guidance as well, it gives you a definition of what they class as plastic. But one main point to note, which we've had a lot of discussions with our customers about, is that biodegradable, compostable, oxo-degradable and bio-based plastics are actually in the scope of the tax. So a lot of people assume they aren't, because they're more green plastics, but they are actually in the scope of the tax. So even if you use those plastics, if they don't have the 30% recycled content requirement, then they will be in scope.
Yep, so almost to summarise all of this, if you produce or import more than 10 tonnes of plastic packaging that's not got 30% recycled content, you're going to get a tax of £200 per tonne.
Yeah.
Basically, isn't it?
Yeah, in a nutshell.
So moving on to some key dates. So when's it going to happen? What are the next steps? So the first key date we've got here is Q4 2021, and that's kind of now, but it's when the final legislation is due from the UK government and HMRC as to how it's all going to work. So we're expecting that any day, aren't we?
The technical consultation on the second draft of the legislation actually ends tomorrow, on the 1st of December. Yeah, tomorrow. Yes, that ends tomorrow. So I wouldn't expect anything imminently. It'd be nice to have something before Christmas, but I think the only point to note from guidance is that this will be available before April the 1st. So it could be next week, it could be after Christmas, it could be March the 31st.
Yes.
We shall see.
I have heard the government have got a few other things on their plate, so they're running a bit late, I think. Right. So the next key date we've got is April the 1st, also known as April Fool's Day. And this is when the tax comes into effect, which fortunately isn't a joke at this point. But this is when, from April the 1st, when records will have to be kept of the weight and recycled content of any plastic packaging imported or made in the UK. So very, very key date. The next date we've got is April the 30th. So a month on from the start date is the deadline for registering with HMRC your tax liability. We're going to cover off in a little bit the portal that is used for this and how that works. But that is a key deadline. It has to be done within a month. Is that right? Yeah,
just one point to note here. So if you are eligible and you are a manufacturer or importer of more than 10 tonnes of plastic packaging in a 12-month period on April the 1st, you have 30 days to register with HMRC. However, after April the 1st, if you become eligible and hit that 10-tonne threshold later on in the year, you will still have 30 days to register with HMRC. So whether that is in May or June, July, whichever month, you will always have 30 days to register with HMRC once you meet that 10-tonne threshold.
Good, is that clear? So the final date on here is July 2022, and this is when the first quarterly tax return is due. So fitting in with the tax financial year, this is when the first tax payment will actually be made. So this is when HMRC really start rubbing their hands. Right. The next few sections we're going to go through is we're going to go through the different stakeholder groups involved in plastic packaging in the UK and how you're going to be impacted and what you're going to have to do. So the first group we thought we'd look at is UK manufacturers. Now, by this we mean a manufacturer of plastic packaging materials. So this is you, if you've got a factory in the UK that's making plastic packaging. So what you're going to have to do, the first thing you're going to have to do is register with the HMRC on their portal. We don't yet know what this portal looks like. We don't know where it is. We don't know what's involved with it, but we know there's a portal coming and you have to register on it. The second thing you're going to have to do is you're going to have to keep records of the weight and plastic content and recycled content of everything you produce. And this will be expected from you as evidence to back up what you claim on the portal for your tax liability. Again, we're not entirely sure, are we, what this evidence may involve and may look like?
No, within the guidance, it does set out some suggestions for documentation of how you can record and evidence where you use recycled content within your plastic packaging. They advise you keep records, keep documentation of the weights and the amount of plastic used. There's this list of suggested documents within the guidance, but it is only that, suggested documents. It's not set in stone. So again, that could change with the final legislation. We are putting together a takeaway PDF after the webinar. So we will put that list of all the suggested documentation within that. So if and when you get to look at how you record this within your business, then there is a list of suggestions from HMRC for you to do that.
Yep. Good. Right. The third thing you have to do is there's a point around invoicing. So this has been not entirely clear in the guidance up to now, but HMRC have previously stated that you would have to have a plastics packaging tax statement on every invoice to your business customers. Any more points on that? Emily, you want to cover off?
Yeah, in the last round of consultation, there was a point where you would have to have a plastic tax statement with your invoices. That, however, has been removed for the 1st of April. However, that is in the short term, it is advised that you look at invoices. So business customers, you do notify them on your invoices of the amount of plastic packaging tax that has been paid. There is no set statement that you have to put together that has been removed. However, there will be some, I can imagine, requirement from HMRC going forward on that point. But again, we'll wait for clarification on that.
Yep. Good. And then the final thing is you will have to pay the tax. So it's not your suppliers, it's not your customers, it is down to you to make that payment when it's due to HMRC. So the impacts on your business, it's likely you're going to have to increase your prices to customers. Now, this isn't obviously stated in the guidance from HMRC, but it is expected across the marketplace that manufacturers and indeed importers will pass on the cost of the tax in the main. Of course, it's your own business decision whether you choose to absorb some of that, but it would, in the main, be passed on to your customers in the form of a price per unit increase on your product, whatever that happens to be. And then the second thing it's going to do, it is going to increase your admin and the workload and paperwork of your record keeping, some extra paperwork that needs doing, the evidence that needs collecting. So you do need to allow for quite a bit of extra admin next year.
Just a point to note, if you do manufacture plastic packaging with 30% or more, although you're not liable, a key point is that you still need to account for the plastic packaging and records that should be kept to that effect.
Yep, good. So the second key stakeholder group we're looking at is importers. So this is you if you buy packaging from abroad. It could be that you're a wholesaler and you buy in plastic packaging from Europe or further afield and you sell it on. Or it could be you if you import plastic packaging for use in your own factory to package your goods. So what are you going to have to do? Again, you're going to register on the HMRC portal. You're going to have to keep records of the weight and plastic content as evidence. So as part of that, just get down to point 5 here, you will be expected to obtain evidence from your supplier or your manufacturer as to the weights of plastic used and any details of any recycled content and possibly the source of that recycled content.
There is some HMRC guidance on that matter where it says where recycled content's imported, you will need to exercise due diligence and hold satisfactory evidence to that effect. Again, it's not completely clear what you need to do, but the point is there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. And then again, there may be some changes to how you have to invoice your customers. That is business customers. So it's not entirely clear how that is shown on invoices, but as we mentioned on the previous page, there may be a statement of packaging tax needed with every invoice. And fourthly, again, you will have to pay the tax. So if you're importing the product into the UK, it's your responsibility to register that with HMRC and pay that tax. So the impact on your business, again, you may well have to increase prices to your customers depending on your specific situation. You will have an increased admin load and an increased amount of paperwork to do. And so be considerate of your back office staff doing the paperwork. And thirdly, we are expecting this will trigger a bit of a review on the sources of plastic in your supply chain. So we're seeing this already across the market a lot. There's a lot of demand for recycled content, people trialing different things, wanting new materials, can we use recycled content? So it's driving a lot of change, and in the main, a change for good across the supply chain. Does that cover that point?
Yeah.
Yeah, is that clear? Thank you. So the third and final stakeholder group we put on here was customers. Emily, do you want to take us through this one?
Yeah, so these are kind of the people who actually deal with manufacturers and importers. So if you actually purchase your packaging from somebody else who would potentially be liable for the tax, which wouldn't be yourself.
Yep. So as a customer, someone who uses packaging, what you're going to have to do, you're going to have to keep records of the weight of plastic packaging that you've used and any details of any recycled content in that plastic packaging. And you will need that as evidence to HMRC. The key point here is that your supplier will have paid that tax or should have paid that tax. So your supplier, being the importer or the manufacturer of that packaging, it's their duty to pay that tax. So you won't have to make any payments to HMRC yourself.
That should be all documented though within your supply chain. So from the invoices that you get from your manufacturer or your importer, it should be listed that it has been paid, because the tax should not be paid twice. That's
part of keeping records. So you may at some point have to prove to HMRC that the packaging you've used has had the tax paid on it further up the supply chain. So impacts, you're likely to see increased prices on plastic packaging. Again, some increased admin and paperwork. And thirdly, same point as before, it is driving a widespread review of plastic use. There's a lot of people looking to see, can we use less plastic? Can we use recycled plastic in place of whatever they were using before? So it's having an effect already, and we're seeing those ripples in the market.
Yeah.
So Emily's good at this bit, the boring stuff.
Yeah, the finer details, the kind of nitty-gritty around the liability that we've just been talking about. So, as already mentioned, HMRC does not give a definitive list of all the plastic packaging that is in scope of the tax. It gives you a definition for plastic packaging, it gives you a definition for plastic, but it doesn't actually tell you what is included and what isn't. It is up to interpretation. However, what they do set out in the guidance is some clear exemptions. So we've got 3 clear categories where exemptions are noted. So the first one, where packaging is secondary to the storage function. So things such as glasses cases, DVD cases, for instance, that would be included in that category. Second category, where the packaging is an integral part of the goods. So thinking things like inhalers, tea bags, things like that. And the third category is where the packaging has been designed for the presentation of goods. So display shelves, things like that. There's a few examples listed within the guidance. There aren't many. It is completely down to interpretation, but these are the 3 clear categories that are exempt from the tax. The guidance does go into 4 product types as well, that although they meet the definition of what plastic packaging is for the scope of the tax, they are, however, listed as being exempt. So I'll just go over these briefly. So the first one is transit packaging on imported goods. So if you are importing goods into the UK, the packaging used around those products to import them in is not within the scope of the tax. Secondly, packaging that's used in aircraft, ship, rail goods stores, which are used for international journeys, that's not included. Third, immediate packaging of a medicinal product. Again, we've got more details on that from the guidance, which we will put in the takeaway PDF, because there's a bit more information around that.
This is your COVID tests and your Calpol bottles and your paracetamol packets and all that good stuff.
And lastly, packaging that's permanently designated for use other than packaging. So again, there's a bit of room for interpretation in all of them, but they are the clear exemptions listed to make you not liable for the tax. So as we've mentioned, which is the integral part of the tax, recycled plastic, HMRC do give a definition of what recycled plastic is. As I'm sure everyone on the call is well aware of the tax, well aware of the products with recycled content in, you're probably well aware of that. We have listed the definition as per the guidance. There are 3 categories that fit within that as well, so we will put that in the takeaway PDF for you, just for reference. Another area which is specifically listed is exports. So if you export your packaging, you are not necessarily liable for the tax. So you can defer payments for up to 12 months, or you could potentially claim credits on the packaging. If you've already paid it, but it is later exported, you should be able to claim that back. So that's one area, dependent on your business and your business operations, whether that's applicable or not. One of the interesting points around the tax is that it talks specifically about finished packaging, plastic packaging components. So I've just got a prop to demonstrate this point. So the components is where the tax is charged on individual plastic components. So a plastic bottle like this would not be one finished plastic packaging component. There's the bottle, there's the lid, and there's the label. All 3 on this example made from plastic. So all 3 would be potentially liable in their own right.
Yep.
Okay.
And so just to clarify on that as well, you've got different components that make up this unit. And for example, if you made the lid out of 100% recycled plastic, but there's no recycled plastic in the bottle, you won't pay tax on the lid, but you will on the bottle. regardless of the total plastic weight and the total recycled content weight.
Done completely on an individual component basis.
Yep. So I've just seen that there's a question popped in asking for some more clarity on this. So very briefly, many people know this already, but the recycled material, the essence of it is it's not such things as offcuts off a production line. It has to have been properly recycled through a recognised and approved recycling centre and process. Is the bones of it, isn't it?
Cool. Yeah. So the next point that's listed in the guidance are multi-materials. So if your packaging is made up of multiple materials but contains more plastic by weight than any other single substance within that, then it will be classed as plastic packaging, a plastic packaging component for the purposes of the tax.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, for example, I'm a factory that makes coffee beans, and I pack my coffee beans in a bag that's made of a paper and plastic laminate. So what this means is that if the material I'm using in those coffee bean bags is 60% paper and 40% plastic, I won't pay the tax, or the tax is not applicable to that product.
Yeah.
If it's the other way around, if it's 60% plastic and 40% paper, then it is within the scope of the tax because the plastic is the higher percentage ingredient component.
And the liable tax will be on the entire weight of that product, not just on the weight of the plastic within it.
Correct.
The list of substances that's included for this, I think are yet to be confirmed. They will be confirmed in the final.
That's the substances you can put with plastic to be included as part of this.
They should be listed in the final legislation.
Yep.
Yeah. Substantial modification. So this is a bit of a critical point. When we referred earlier to manufacturers, for the purposes of the tax, a manufacturer is classed as the party that has made the last substantial modification before the packing or filling process. So that's just a bit of an area just to be careful of. So if you do, for instance, buy plastic products, which you then alter and change the shape, structure, thickness or weight of, you could be classed as the manufacturer because you are making the last substantial modification. So it is listed in the guidance that things like extrusion, moulding, layering, laminating, printing and forming could be deemed a substantial modification. So that is within the scope. You could be classed as a manufacturer if that that is something that you do as part of the packaging process.
Good. Hopefully that's clear. So now on to the unknowns. So what don't we know that we don't know?
We don't know.
We don't know. So we don't know what the HMRC portal is going to look like. Details yet to be released on that. No idea what that involves or what is going to be involved in filling that in. We don't know the multi-material substances that can be included to exempt your product from the tax. We're not entirely sure on some of the documentation, so we're not sure what evidence may be required to show HMRC how much plastic packaging you've used and about the recycled content in that packaging. We don't know about the invoicing and how that works, as to whether there is a plastics tax statement needed on every invoice. So that's not entirely clear from HMRC yet. We're hoping that will become clear on the next guidelines. And the final point, possibly the most important point, is about the supply. That's the supply of recycled content, plastic, to go in packaging. So already we're seeing, and there's quite a supply and demand situation going on, as more and more companies seek to turn their packaging from a virgin material to recycled content material. And there is only a finite amount of recycled plastic available, so there's only a certain amount to go around. And we do see, moving into next year, there could be a challenge with getting hold of the recycled content. So as part of that, obviously, we could be seeing costs of recycled content plastic increase. So we don't know going into next year what the commercials would look like on paying a tax versus using a recycled content material.
Yep.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So finally, just to, we've got 1 more minute before the questions. Many of you on the call are familiar names to us, and I'm sure you'll know who Lindum is. You'll know us as a transit packaging expert. We've been working with many of you for many years. But we've sort of put a slide together to show you what should your packaging supplier be doing to help you get your head around the plastics packaging tax and find the best way through it.
Yeah.
Want to kick us off, Emily?
Yeah, so obviously, Bob's spoken about, for us in particular, transit packaging expertise. Go to your packaging supplier, if that's us or someone else, ask for advice and guidance when it comes to the tax. Recycled content products, obviously that's an obvious one, but that's what everyone will potentially look to do. As Bob's mentioned, there could be a potential supply issue, probably will be.
So on this as well, it's a growing market. If you're stuck for supply or sourcing of recycled content products, reach out to us. We do have a growing range of stretch film and tape with recycled content in it, and we're able to produce other products to bespoke specifications, so things like heat shrink and lidding films. It can all be done.
One thing, important point to note that we found with recycled content products is that they sometimes perform differently to the non-recycled version of them. So particularly pallet wrap, for instance, we find the recycled content performs completely differently. So one thing that we look at is performance testing.
Yeah.
If you want to
so
elaborate.
Speak to your supplier about what support they can offer you in performance testing. We have a mobile pallet stability testing laboratory, so we can help optimize, benchmark, and measure the pallet stability of your pallets. So we can then test if there's any impact by using recycled products on your pallet stability.
I think the last point as well, which is probably important, is mitigation. So if you can't switch to recycled content products, if you can't get hold of them or you can't switch to them in time, then what other mitigations can you put in place to avoid liability of the tax, or avoid as much liability of the tax? If
you use less plastic, you'll pay less tax.
Yeah, that's the crux of it.
We can help, if you're struggling for that, we can help you optimise on things like stretch film. There's a lot of work that can be done to reduce your plastic usage on that. And that was the second to last point, because we didn't do this one, which is forward orders. And there's two parts to this. First is the deadline of 1st of April. There's nothing stopping you stocking up with plastic packaging ahead of that to minimise your tax liability next year. And the second part is, as recycled content materials possibly become scarcer, as demand increases, we would advise you look at that sooner rather than later and perhaps get some forward orders booked in with your supplier for recycled content packaging. So with that, we'll head on to questions, which we've got 3 minutes left. We're now slightly over on that one. So my email address is at the top of the page here, and it'll also be coming through on the chat again shortly. Luella, what questions have we got? Can you put it up on the screen?
Yeah, you see that?
So, so does stretch film used for pallet packaging fall under the tax, Emily? So does stretch film, so pallet wrap basically, does pallet wrap fall under the tax?
If it's imported into the UK or manufactured into the UK, then it does fall within the scope. If it has 30% or more recycled content, then it will not be liable. The only time pallet wrap does not fall within the scope is as one of the exemptions I mentioned. So if you are importing other goods and it is used to wrap around pallets, importing into the UK, then that is not included in the scope of the tax, so you wouldn't be liable for that.
Yep, fair enough.
Another one?
So someone's asking here, where does the tax money go? I'll answer that if you like.
Yeah.
So I have actually seen that on some of the documents. The tax money goes directly back into the Treasury. So it's not going to support any specific recycling scheme. It is just going back into the HMRC's
coffers.
Big black pot. Next question that's coming up. In fact, it looks like 2 or 3 people have asked a similar question here. If less than if more than 30% recycled content can't be used in our packaging due to the food we put in it, is there an exemption? So I think, Emily, what this person's asking is they're packing food by the looks of it, and they can't get the food contact safety using recycled film.
So obviously, if there's a food safety requirement, that's obviously got to be put ahead of the tax. However, there's no exemption. The exemptions that there are within the guidance have been mentioned, and none of them refer specifically to food safety. So in that instance, no, it wouldn't be classed as an exemption.
So,
it's just one of those things.
Really sorry, you're going to have to.
So potentially where you might have to look at mitigation or looking at maybe reducing the amount of plastic or
what can be
supply
done?
chain options.
Can you reduce the amount of plastic you use? Great one to start with. So I think we're on past. We'll just answer one more very quickly. It's a nice one there. Is 10 tonnes per month or year before tax required? So Emily, if you're a producer producing plastic packaging, is it 10 tonnes per month or per year before the tax comes in? It's
mentioned in the guidance as 10 tonnes per 12-month period. I think that's probably because it starts in April and is in line with the tax year.
So 12 months.
So it wouldn't be a standard year. I think it would be in a 12-month period. Okay. So if that wouldn't be per month.
So the answer to that is it's per year?
Yeah.
Done. Right, that does bring us to the end of our time. I think we have got quite a few more questions coming in.
What we will do is the questions that's coming, because there does seem to be a fair few cropping up, we will go over them all in the next day or so, look through them all and provide a detailed answer for all of them, and we will send that out with our webinar PDF, which we're going to compile all the information in more detail that we've talked about today. From all the different locations that they are. We'll put them all in one concise PDF and we will send them out to all attendees along with the answers to all the questions which we don't have time to answer.
Sounds good. So thank you very much for joining. It's been good. Look forward to catching up with any of you who want any further information, and we'll speak again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.